The 2000s were supposed to be the decade horsepower got responsible. Stability control was coming. Airbags were everywhere. Insurance companies had charts. None of that stopped Detroit from building cars that got recalled for exploding airbags, recalled for not making enough horsepower, and in one case investigated by the federal government for snapping a wheel clean off. These are 15 American muscle cars from the 2000s that were genuinely dangerous, some because they were too fast for their own hardware, some because the hardware itself was the problem. Every recall here is real and on the federal record. Let's start. Number 15. 2002 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am WS6. The last Firebird ever built, and Pontiac sent it out with a 5.7-liter LS1 V8 making 325 horsepower in WS6 trim, the most power GM's F-body platform had carried to that point. 0 to 60 in the low 5-second range, a quarter mile in the 13s, on a chassis whose basic architecture dated to 1993 and rode on a live rear axle that had no business handling that much torque. The danger wasn't a recall, it was timing. GM killed the Firebird the same year this car peaked, meaning the most powerful, most dangerous version of the car was also the last one anybody got to learn its limits on. Number 14. 2004 Pontiac GTO. Pontiac resurrected the GTO name by importing a Holden Monaro from Australia and dropping in a 5.7-liter LS1 making 350 horsepower. The styling was criticized for looking too tame for the badge, and that mismatch is exactly what made it dangerous. It didn't look fast. It ran a 13.6-second quarter mile. Drivers who underestimated a car because of its conservative sheet metal found out the hard way what 350 horsepower and rear-wheel drive could do in the wet, with an early 2000s traction control system that could be switched fully off. Number 13. 2004 Mercury Marauder. A Crown Victoria body shell hiding a 4.6-liter Dodge V8 making 302 horsepower, built specifically to be a sleeper. Mercury wanted something that looked like a fleet car and drove like a muscle car, and they got exactly that. A 3,800-pound sedan that could embarrass cars that looked far more serious. The danger was structural. A heavy, tall sedan platform with a powerful V8 and a suspension tuned for police-spec durability, not high-speed cornering. It would go, but it wasn't built to stop or turn at the speeds the engine could reach. Number 12. 2006 Dodge Charger SRT8. Chrysler's Hemi-powered Charger reboot came with 425 horsepower and a recall history that reads like a checklist of things you don't want near a brake line. NHTSA documentation on Charger and 300 SRT8 models from this generation includes a recall for rear brake tubes positioned too close to the exhaust gas recirculation tube. Sustained contact wore through the brake line, risking both a brake fluid leak and an engine compartment fire on the same vehicle at the same time. A second recall affected the driver's frontal airbag inflator across the same SRT8-equipped Chrysler and Dodge lineup, moisture intrusion that could cause the inflator to rupture and send metal fragments into the cabin during deployment. A 425 horsepower car with a brake line that could fail and an airbag that could shrapnel you. Both confirmed, both filed with the federal government. Number 11. 2003 Mercury Marauder. The launch year had its own specific problem, an undersized rear sway bar that left the heavy Marauder with handling characteristics that didn't match what 302 horsepower demanded. Mercury revised the suspension the following year, but the 2003 cars went out the door first, with buyers as the test fleet for a chassis tune that wasn't finished yet. Number 10. 2005 Ford Mustang GT. Ford's retrofuturism Mustang reboot brought back styling cues from the 60s on a brand new platform, but kept a solid rear axle under a 4.6-liter V8 making 300 horsepower. Magazine testers immediately flagged the live axle as the car's weak point. It hopped and chattered under hard acceleration in a way that independent rear suspension designs from this same era, including Ford's own SVT Cobra, had already moved past. Ford chose nostalgia over the engineering they already had in-house. Number 9. 2003 to 2004, Ford Mustang SVT Cobra Terminator. Ford's first factory supercharged Mustang Cobra, rated at 390 horsepower with an Eaton Roots-type blower bolted to a cast-iron block. Owners and independent dynos consistently found the real number closer to 410-425 horsepower at the crank. Ford had deliberately underrated it after getting burned by the opposite problem on the previous Cobra. Early 2003 cars also shipped with a defect that triggered a genuine federal recall. A gas pedal cover with a screw that could catch in the carpet under hard acceleration, leaving the throttle physically stuck open. A car already underrated on power, with a pedal that could jam wide open. Number 8, 1999 to 2001 Ford Mustang SVT Cobra. This one belongs on a 2000s list because the consequences played out into 2000 and 2001. Ford advertised 320 horsepower. Independent testing showed the real number was closer to 300 to 305. The shortfall traced to a faulty intake manifold and restrictive exhaust mufflers, and Ford was forced into a federal recall of 5,300 cars to fix it, replacing intake manifolds, reflashing computers, and swapping exhaust systems to actually deliver the horsepower buyers paid for. It's the only car in muscle car history recalled for being too slow. Number 7, 2003 to 2010 Dodge Viper SRT10. The Viper's V10 grew to 8.3 liters and 500 horsepower for the third generation, with no traction control and no stability control as standard. NHTSA opened a formal investigation into nearly 9,670 of these cars, SRT10, ACR, and the race-only competition coupe, after 8 owners reported the rear suspension knuckle failing at speed and causing a crash. The investigation ran 8 months, including metallurgic testing on a wrecked 2004 car's steering knuckle. The agency ultimately closed the case without a recall, finding the knuckles broke during the crashes, not before them. But for 8 months, the federal government treated this as a car whose rear suspension might be failing on its own at speed. Number 6, 2003-2004 Dodge Viper SRT10 airbag recall. The same generation Viper carries its own separate, fully executed recall. 3,660 cars built between November 2001 and June 2004, with an airbag control module vulnerable to electrical noise beyond its tolerance, which could cause the front airbags and seatbelt pretensioners to deploy without warning, with no crash at all, while the car was being driven. Chrysler's remedy was a full module replacement, an 8.3-liter, 500-horsepower car that could deploy its own airbags into a driver's face for no reason while doing 70 on the highway. Number 526 Dodge Charger/Magnum Police Package. A recall covering 20,283 Charger and Magnum police spec vehicles built with a column shifter. The gear shift cable could disengage from its steering column mounting bracket, causing the transmission's gear indicator to show the wrong position entirely. The real danger was what it enabled, a car that could move unexpectedly when the driver believed it was safely in park. Civilian SRT8 Chargers shared the platform and the same fundamental shifter architecture. Number 4, 2008 Dodge Challenger SRT8. The Challenger's modern return came with a 6.1-liter Hemi, making 425 horsepower, in a body styled to look exactly like the car that started the muscle car insurance crisis in 1970. That's not incidental. Dodge built it to provoke exactly the driving behavior that made the original dangerous, on a modern chassis still figuring out how to put down that much torque through a live rear axle. Early production also fell inside the same airbag inflator recall population, affecting Chrysler's LX and LC platform cars across this era. The same moisture-related inflator rupture risk carried over from the Charger and 300. Number 3.2026 Ford GT. Ford built 4,038 units of a road-going Le Mans Tribute with a supercharged 5.4-liter V8, making 550 horsepower, a manual gearbox, and 0 driver aids beyond ABS. 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds, a top speed past 200 miles per hour, mid-engine style weight distribution, in a car that demanded real skill to drive at its limit and offered almost nothing to catch a mistake once committed. It wasn't recalled for a defect, it was simply built with a margin for error close to 0, on purpose. Number 2, 2006 to 2010 Chevrolet Corvette Z06. A 7.0-liter LS7 making 505 horsepower in a car that weighed under 3,200 pounds, at the time, the most powerful naturally aspirated production engine GM had ever built. No spare tire, no carpet in some trim areas, weight saved everywhere possible specifically to chase a lap time. The result was a car genuinely capable of overwhelming a driver's reaction time in first and second gear. On a chassis with no traction control override warning sophisticated enough to catch every mistake an inexperienced owner could make with that much instant torque. Number 1. 2008 Dodge Viper SRT10 ACR. The American Club Racer package stripped weight, added a massive adjustable rear wing, fitted Penske racing shocks, and left the 8.3-liter V10's 600 pound-foot of torque completely unfiltered by any electronic safety net. It is, on paper, the closest thing to the Dodge Demon's spiritual ancestor on this entire list. A factory-built car designed explicitly to be driven at the absolute edge of control, sold to the public with a warranty. It shares its base chassis with the same SRT-10 platform that sat under a federal suspension investigation and a real airbag recall. Dodge built the most track-focused version of the most investigated car on this list, and called it a daily driver. The Demon needed a trans brake and drag radials to hit its number. Every car on this list got there with a manual gearbox, a recall notice, or both, and most of them got there on the way to work. Which one of these would you actually trust yourself to drive? Drop your answer in the comments, and subscribe for the next one.